now because I started eating, but I feel really good. And if you haven't gotten a drift of the colonoscopy stories, it's not that my wife thinks I'm colonoscopy obsessed, but the fact is, I think I want to be the face of colonoscopy. I mean, Katie Couric has. It seems like she has abdicated from going from pure colonoscopy to this other kind of poop in the box thing. She's doing ads for that. Uh, and colonoscopy, there's this big bugaboo about it. I mean, people think it sounds worse than it is because it is colonoscopy is colonoscopy. That's five syllables. That's 5 syllables of danger. That's not, you know, we live in a monosyllabic world, and 5 syllables is just, it's just a little too much. 5 syllables is just a little too much, don't you think? I hope you heard that. I'm not sure if you heard that. Hey, we're here. Hey, it's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, amok to you. My takes, all things considerable. This is my takeout. I was Emil amok's takeout long before all the other takeouts. You know, it's Asian takeout. I was a takeout before the pandemic. Anyway, I come on, I talk about the news, I talk about the things on my mind, or the things that have gone through my colon. If you don't know, I've been writing about my colon the last week or so. Go to my columns at Inquirer.net. That's a Filipino version. It's in English, but you can read it. And INQUIRER.net, Inquirer.net / I think my name. But, or go to the ALDEF blog, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, kind of a different version. You'll see a picture of me. And today I have such spotty internet. I think my internet needs a colonoscopy because the large intestine of my Wi-Fi seems to be clogged. Anyway, welcome to this program. Is it beginning to feel like Thanksgiving a little bit? I mean, I don't know. I think maybe by Wednesday, when you're in the middle of your travel plans and you're trying to get to somewhere and you're stuck in traffic or you're in an airport and you're saying, oh, I wonder if I put those, you know, if I should have brought that extra pair of this or that, and maybe I shouldn't have, checked in a bag. I should have just put it all on my back. Then it'll feel like Thanksgiving. Then it'll feel like the really, to get in the mood for this, you got to watch the Thanksgiving movie of all time. Just like A Christmas Story is the Christmas movie of all time. Because, I love Gene Shepard. But the Thanksgiving movie of all time is John Hughes' Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, right? Clearly. No? Watch it. Watch it tonight. It'll get you in the mood. It'll get you in the mood because tell them Del Griffith sent you. And check out your shower curtains. Because if you need some, Mr. Griffith will help you. So anyway, we're still kind of somber today because we're still dealing with the whole Club Q thing. More details. The vets who saved, I mean, you heard them generically, but their names were read out. They were identified. Richard Fierro gave a bunch of interviews today or yesterday, starting with CNN, then he was all over. He was there with his family celebrating a party, a birthday, and his wife's boyfriend was shot and killed. But Fierro, who's an Army major, went into action, disarmed Aldrich, who is the Anderson Aldrich, who is the alleged shooter. And then a Navy guy, I forget his name, but he assisted. Talk about don't ask, don't tell, right? Well, that was a reminder that we're all in this together, right? To see Fierro break down and cry as he described how he was there protecting his family. I mean, this is a Thanksgiving story for 2022. And, I call this this is my takes on all things considerable, right? This is my Asian American micro talk show for the AAPI and the AAXs. And I just felt like when I heard Fierro say that, well, I was feeling that as I was getting bits and pieces of the story all throughout the weekend. But when Fierro said that, yeah, we are all family. This is our family. And if you are an Asian American who happens to be listening to the show, because, it's sort of my audience, I have a large BIPOC audience, well, not large, but a BIPOC audience. I'm just saying, we all can relate, right? We are all standing among the others, all the others standing with the others who are othered. And we are together. And all you have to do is listen to any of the interviews that Fierro, an Army major, a vet, right, who really is responsible for making sure that this didn't go beyond 5 deaths. I mean, there were dozens who were injured, and many more in the club who, even if they weren't injured physically, were traumatized. And then it goes out like concentric circles. We're all traumatized by the actions of Anderson Aldrich. The alleged actions. The actions that we saw unfold on video from the stories. We've all been victimized. And if it hasn't hit you yet, well, maybe you've avoided the news, which is not a bad thing to avoid the news. But at some point, you're going to catch a story and you're going to say, that happened where? When? That happened to us? That happened here in America? And then you'll see, what is going on in this country? I mean, this is Colorado Springs, where Club Q was. The fact that Club Q was in Colorado Springs, I mean, it's amazing. It is as conservative as they say, as all get out, right? This is where I think Focus on the Family, you know that show, if you've ever been stuck in a car with only AM radio, I don't know if that's even true anymore, but I know 10 years ago, I had a car that just had AM radio, and all I got was Focus on the Family when I was out at a certain time. And I heard their really outrageously conservative views on the family. But this is where Club Q was. And the fact that it was able to exist and be that safe place for people, the LGBTQ community, and anyone else who is othered, anyone else who is not part of the mainstream. I mean, I've told you how in my past, I lived in Houston, Texas, which is right now, it seems like about as cosmopolitan as you can get. You know, huge Chinatown, huge, population. But in the 70s, when I was there, a young kid in radio, and I was in Houston's Montrose area. That's where all the radio stations were. And I had a few gay friends. friends. And we'd hang out. They'd take me to places that were really, they were on the fringe. And it's so funny. Like I said, there we were. I could not imagine 40, 50 years hence that we are in this situation and still behind the times. Or at least there is a segment of our population, certainly a political segment, that wants to make sure we stay in those times. So as we piece together the bits from Club Q, the story, I think what Club Q has given us is a gift. If you're not aware that this kind of polarization exists, I can't imagine how you couldn't. But in case it just doesn't hit, sometimes a story has to come up and just hit you and say, yeah, this is the way it is. Maybe it will encourage people to come to their senses. I don't know. Maybe it'll encourage people to see, hey, we're not that different. When you see that an Army major with his family who was at Club Q was leading the charge that stopped Anderson Aldrich. I mean, there are many threads of this story that lead to a sense that we are one, that we can come together. That's the conclusion. How can anyone come away from this story and not have any sympathy for the 5 who died, for the transgender victims? Now, a big deal has been made that the police made sure that the dead were remembered by their proper names and gender. And it's just, this is the way it is. And I have to admit, I was a bit ashamed because maybe I was a little part of that resistance where I said, come on, it's not. But every time you say your name and gender, you are saying, let's have that clarity. Let's have that awareness. And that just struck me. This idea of dead naming people properly. And they did that at the press conference yesterday. And that I think this is going to be remembered. Club Q is going to be remembered. Just like, I don't know how many people, when this came down, you remembered Orlando, the Pulse nightclub, that shooting. I mean, go back. I mean, when Pulse happened, you can Google my name and Aldef, and I read about the Pulse nightclub. And then I went to Orlando. I love Orlando because that's where one of the cities that had really tremendous, it's the best fringe festival. And I hope to return there in 2023. But I got to go to the scene at the Pulse nightclub. And I don't think, I mean, it was one of the first things that came to mind when I saw that Club Q was the target of the attack this weekend. It just reminded me of the Pulse. And so now this is added on. Club Q is on top, added on. And we got to do something about it. I mean, we keep talking about how we're going to do something about it. And every time we've got this, we have these new incidents that remind us of this hate in our country. It's sobering. But they tried to spoil the National Transgender Day of Remembrance on Sunday. When I say they, because I don't think this guy was acting alone. He may have acted alone, Anderson Aldrich, but he was called by some symptom that's out there from the right to take action against these people. And remember, these aren't mainstream. I mean, some were mainstream gays, but the political right is now targeting the transgender community in such a way that they are isolating them and making them the subject of this hyper xenophobic impulse that they have, this fear that is irrational and is really infecting American society. And it's troubling. And so let this Club Q incident be the wake-up call for all the rest of us to stand up and to recognize our place among the others. If you're a member of the Black, Indigenous, person of color, people of color community, if you're Asian American, we are among the others. And we can't be silent now. Not about this. This is a moment where we have to stand as a community, speak out peacefully, and try to reconcile and heal. I mean, it's very difficult. You know, we live in this divided political environment, and it's painful to see how one side is trying to use this issue in particular as one of those fissures. It's an artificial one, because you saw, if you heard any of the reports, that guy who's the hero, it could have been any one of us. Anyway, I think it's going to start to feel like Thanksgiving in a day or so. And then I know it's painful to think about this, because there was an article in the Washington Post today that kind of hit me. And it hit me because, try to find this. I can't, I don't want to paraphrase it, because it just struck me how the LGBTQ family is united by our fear for our lives. And it's written by Jennifer Finney Boylan, a professor of English at Barnard, a fellow at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. And she's, I mean, just the headline, though, is the telling part. The LGBTQ family is united by our fear for our lives. That's the scary part. Because it shouldn't be that you are what you are as a matter of life or death. Because that's war, right? That's combat. And we shouldn't have that in a civil society. But that's what it's like. That's what, and that's what anyone who's been othered feels united, because we have all existed in this American society. We have all experienced that fear for our lives. Oddly enough, it's usually over who we love, right? I mean, I'm Filipino American, right? My father's of the generation where in the 20s, if you were seen with a white woman, you would be killed or could be killed. I mean, you take your white women or you take the jobs of white people, you would be killed. I mean, that's a footnote in history, in everyone else's history, but not in Asian American Filipino history. Asian Americans, Chinese Americans killed. Not in the 20s, but you go back 19th century. Every one of us who have been othered have that same fear for our lives. So there should be more unity than not when we consider the story of Club Q. My goodness, it's painful. It's painful. So I'm going to read a little bit of this. This is Jennifer Finney Boylan's piece in the Post. And what do we have here? Dolly Parton asked me. The typical American family? This was in Provincetown, Massachusetts, many years ago, on the street in front of a drag club where my wife and I were pushing a baby carriage. At the time, I seemed to be a youngish, tweedy English professor. What I did not look like, though, was the thing I actually was, a closeted transgender woman. How I wanted back then to shout to that drag artist who was not actually Dolly Parton, "I'm like you. We are sisters, you and I." But I didn't have the courage. I couldn't imagine it. See, isn't it always? It's a matter of courage to be who you are. It shouldn't be a matter of courage to be who you are or to speak out. Really, right? So here we have this trans woman who's out in Provincetown at a drag club, and the drag club has Dolly Parton, who's not Dolly Parton, saying, "Look at you, the American family," because they look like the American family. And it's kind of like a weird kind of reality chamber. And this woman wanted to speak back to the Dolly Parton, say, "I'm just like you." That's the kind of weird dissonance you get in America. But this is innocent. No violence. Right? In the years since then, and especially since I did finally come out in 2000, I've occasionally wondered whether the thing I longed to say to her was true. Was I her sister? Was I like her? This is, once again, Jennifer Finney Boylan's piece. First person. On Sunday, as the news about the murders inside Club Q in Colorado Springs emerged, I thought of these questions again. Among the victims was bartender Daniel Aston, 28, a trans man. His partner, a drag performer, was behind the bar when the shooting began. It was not lost on those of us in the LGBT community that the massacre took place on the annual Transgender Day of Remembrance, a day set aside in memory of all the trans people who have lost their lives to violence. Nor is it lost on us that conservatives across the country this year have been using the LGBT community as their whipping boys and girls. Representative Breonna Takeout, Colorado's first openly trans legislator, tweeted on Sunday, "When politicians and pundits keep perpetuating tropes, insults, and misinformation about the trans and LGBTQ plus community, this is a result." Well, that's the truth. That's the truth, right? You know, things have changed from the time when people may have seen Paul Lynde play the middle square on Hollywood Squares and make jokes about his effeminate nature, right? I mean, in some ways, showbiz we haven't learned from it. We keep joking, and we need to sometimes check in with reality, but not go to the extreme in terms of having a shooting be our reality check. We don't need violence to be our reality check. We just need people to encounter real LGBTQ people in our communities instead of driving them into the closet. That's what's needed. We don't need violence to make us understand, realize that, oh, we are really, we're one. We're part of the same, part of the same cosmos, same universe. We're together. We don't need violence to have that happen. Maybe we can interact with one another, talk to each other. Back to Finney's piece. In October, a man attacked a trans librarian, and other attacks by armed men groups such as the Proud Boys have disrupted drag-related events in Texas, Nevada, and Oregon, and the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where I once presented a grand rounds lecture on the variety of trans experiences. Security has been increased in the wake of threats to its transgender clinic. In Massachusetts, Boston Children's Hospital reports that its clinicians and staff have received multiple threats of violence. One observer at a Colorado Springs vigil said, "It feels like when is it going to happen to me?" as opposed to thinking, this kind of thing will never touch me. See, we've gone beyond. I mean, we used to have this feeling that we live in civil society. This can't happen to us. But no, now it's like, oh, this is happening. I mean, before it was like, the Pulse, when the Pulse nightclub thing happened in Orlando, it was kind of like a more generic kind of going into a gay bar and shooting it up. But there's something with Club Q that makes this seem purposeful, political, intentional, and it seems to coincide with all these things that are happening out there in the world, in American society. The right wing intentionally targeting anything trans for fear that they fearful that their own kids may go down that path. Well, they don't go down that path. They are that path. Conversion therapy doesn't work. And so the next thing they do is they go political and try to harass anything trans or supportive of the trans community. It's political. And notice how they go after all these drag events. I mean, where I am in California, there was a drag event about 90 miles away from me. not necessarily an urban area, but it wasn't San Francisco, it wasn't Sacramento, but it was a sub-rural community. They had a drag event, and they had people show up threatening these people. Sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes it's the mere presence of someone you know who is homophobic or transphobic is violent enough. Their presence, their demeanor. It's a bullying. And that's what's happening. And the bullies now are armed and shoot to kill. This is not a good development. And that's why Club Q is going to be remembered for a long, long time. Just like people remember, Stonewall. People remember the Pulse. They'll remember Club Q because this is when the violence people can see, because the violence coincides with the political occurrences. Back to Finney's op-ed. In August, Colorado Republican Lauren Boebert, who has used slurs to describe trans people, warned drag queens to stay away from children in the state's 3rd district, where she just won re-election. Boebert, right, from Colorado. Late Sunday, Boebert expressed sympathy for the victims. The victims, she said, were in her prayers. Yeah. Honestly. Can you believe her? Can you trust that? Titone, another congresswoman who is pro-LGBTQ, said, "You spreading tropes and insults contributed to the hatred for us. There's blood on your hands." And thank goodness Titone did that, because Boebert is part of that cadre of right-wing extremists who are going after trans people. And when something like this happens, they say, oh, thoughts and prayers. That's the emptiness of Lauren Boebert, the emptiness of Marjorie Taylor Greene, the emptiness of that wing of the Republican Party. Let's call it what it is. It's MAGA. It's the conservatives, the evangelical conservatives. Back to Finney's op-ed. Like many trans women, especially those of us who are decades post-transition, I've occasionally learned how much in common I have with the drag community. I've loved watching drag, and I've looked upon the artistry of my friends with wonder and delight, but I have never thought of my gender as part of a fantasy or a performance. All I ever really wanted for myself was a solace and grace that came from finally feeling at home in my own body. To be honest, at this age, I'm more Edna Crabapple than Dolly Parton. This is Finney speaking in her op-ed. Actually, what she says about the drag community is real. Look, I have family members who are married to drag artists. And I've just been exposed to the drag community over the last 5 years. I have great respect for not just drag queens, but drag kings. I didn't know there was such a thing. Drag kings. And furthermore, when it comes to drag, can anyone say there is, well, not to make this competition, but the Filipino American drag community, my God, they are, that is art. That is, when I was growing up, they called it female impersonation. But the GAPA, the Gay Asian Pacific American Alliance, I think they're called GAPA. They have these great drag shows, and I was fortunate, it was my good fortune to judge 1 year, man, they were good. They were good. If you ever have the opportunity to see a GAPA event, there's nothing but joy, right? I mean, there's no proselytizing, not like the evangelicals. The evangelicals proselytize. The drag queens just have fun. Man, it's a performance. It's art. RuPaul, he's kind of like a performance god, right? In my mind, great artist. Back to Finney's op-ed. She says, to be honest, at this age, I'm more Edna Crabapple than Dolly Parton. I've been married to my wife for 34 years now. 12 as husband and wife, 22 as wife and wife. Our children, just toddlers during that long ago vacation in Provincetown, have since gone into the world to find their own adventures. And isn't that the way it should be when you're parenting, right? You just go and become your own adventure. Yes, that Dolly Parton was my sister. She refers back to the Dolly Parton at the beginning of the piece. Just as Daniel Aston was my brother. Just as all of us in the LGBTQ community in this country are one family, bound together. Not only by the love we feel for another, but also by the way every day we have now come to fear for our lives. And if I met that Dolly Parton now, even with all the changes in our, I would still give her the answer I gave her 3 decades ago. The typical American family, why, yes, that's us. Yes, that's us. Op-ed piece, Washington Post today, by Jennifer Finney Boylan. The LGBTQ family is united by our fear for our lives. We are together. We are united. And if you have been, or if you are an othered, it's time to stand with the others, right? We're others together. There is a sense of unity. So we pray. Prayer is good. Contemplation is good. Instead of a sense of anger, a sense of forgiveness and a sense of trying to become one. That would be helpful. Well, that's my talk show sound effect. All right, so we'll see what happens. Anderson Aldrich, still the suspect, still in the hospital, I believe, but he will be charged, formally charged. And we'll just see what happens. If you haven't seen the Fierro interview, Richard Fierro, he's the guy who went into action, right? And his daughter, who was at the club with her boyfriend was killed. It's going to be a sad week, but maybe a week we can learn. Not a bad week. If it's a week we can learn from this tragedy and move beyond. Let Club Q, the incident at Club Q, be not an empty occurrence, but an occurrence that made us think and made us move forward. So, other good news today, though. The student loan forgiveness plan. If you haven't caught this news, Joe Biden says he's going to continue the hold on the student loan forgiveness until all this nonsense, political nonsense from the courts, is settled. So there's been a hold on paying back those student loans, and now they're going to continue that hold until the political nonsense is figured out by the courts. But this is now a bona fide political issue. You'll recall the evolution of this issue. Bernie Sanders brought it up during the campaign. Biden kind of didn't really say anything about it until late in the game, into his first year. It became an issue. It's a real issue because it is a middle class issue, and it helps people. It helps regular people. Helps me. I mean, we got an email saying, "Hey, you qualify. I hope you too." Yeah, this is a real issue because look, if you're wealthy, you don't need student loans, right? If you're rich, I mean, it's not the 1%. It's like, do you have takeout student loans? Well, yeah. All right, this is the middle class issue. This is a Democratic issue. This is, and thank goodness Joe Biden finally jumped on it. Because if you're looking for something tangible that will help you sort of understand, well, am I getting something out of this? Student loan forgiveness. I mean, it's real. And Joe Biden said, hey, we're going to extend the payback freeze until we get the court issue stuff figured out. That's a plus. That's a plus for the Democrats and a plus for Joe Biden. All right. Other things that came up in the news. SCOTUS not going to get in the way, going to allow the Democrats to get Trump's tax returns. I guess soon we'll see just what a fraud Donald Trump is. That's a good thing. The World Cup. Are you into the World Cup? As a former soccer coach, I was a Class C soccer coach, youth soccer. Now, look, I love soccer, and I love being a soccer coach. And the World Cup is great, but why Qatar? Why Qatar? You know, this whole thing with Club Q, and then to see how people with rainbow gear in Qatar, how they've been held up, you know, because, you know, in Qatar, it's illegal to be gay. You can't be gay in Qatar. So that's kind of obnoxious. But not only can you not be gay in Qatar, but it helps if you're not Asian, Filipino, any migrant who is there to work. Because let's face it, that is a community or a society that is so divided. You think we're divided here? How they treat their workers, how they treat their migrants. It's and then you say, all right, look, you can dump on FIFA for granting Qatar the World Cup, or for having the World Cup here in the first place. But look, the Olympics, they had a Nazi Germany, they had, during World War II, you're always going to have these politicals, but the World Cup is slightly different because the World Cup is almost like a kind of cleanse that Qatar can just sort of like douse itself in to say, oh, we're not that bad. We're Qatar. We hosted the World Cup. And so, come on, all you big global leaders, come do business with us. And I saw something that they just signed a big deal with China. Well, China. How perfect is China, right? I don't know. It just seems like the World Cup is enabling Qatar, what they do to Filipinos. Filipinos love to go to Qatar because they can make like $400 a month, I think. That's big money in the Philippines. They send the money back. That's part of the Filipino economy. But they got a weird system in Qatar where they can take away your passport. They have a system that practically emulates a form of servitude, indentured servitude, kind of. Look, they they have free will to a degree if you can get around, but definitely you are. I don't think you're even a second class citizen. I think you're more like third class, maybe even fourth. So I kind of like to look at the World Cup from afar. I put it on the cable. I watch the games. The best trick is to use the key play feature on, if you have certain cable replays, you can just go to the key plays and you can watch a 90-minute or 100-minute game in about 10 minutes, which is, it's a lot of soccer for a lot of people who have no time. But look, it's a beautiful game. I'm trying to get in it. Argentina lost to Saudi Arabia today. America lost to Wales. That probably was their best chance at a victory. They're going to play England. That's going to could be a killer. England looks good. They trounced Iraq or Iran the other day. So keep my eye out on the World Cup. Everyone loves the 49ers today. They won in Mexico. I thought, I hope they don't eat the wrong foods. No, they ate whatever they kept eating. Whatever they ate yesterday, they should keep eating. Because they played like a team for once. All right, 49er fans. A lot of Asian Americans who are 49er fans. Because, the Rams. Can't be a Ram fan now. Big losers. All right. I think that's going to be it for today. All right. There probably will be some repeats. There probably will be some pop-ups. I'll do pop-ups at 2 o'clock Pacific every day. Or maybe I'll just do some repeats. But whenever you're watching, if you're watching us live, you know where to catch us. On Twitter, at Emil Amok. On Facebook, at facebook.com/EmilGuillermo.media. At YouTube, at Emil Amok 1, EMIL AMOK 1. That's on YouTube. And on AMOK.com. So regular listeners of our show know that I like to end with a little meditation. Sometimes it's just time to be quiet. Time to do nothing. Just appreciate silence. And do a little metta, METTA, a little loving kindness. Because as you offer it to others, you get to experience it too. Twofold, threefold, however many folds you want. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. I will be back again tomorrow, the next day. We'll have something. We'll have a present somewhere. But we are lurching toward thanks. Till next time. Mahal